Is it viable making a living independently as a convention artist? I collected data from almost 1,000 artists who were generous enough to share their expenses, their income, and the harsh reality of making a living this way. The growing greed among some showrunners, the skyrocketing competition, is it actually possible to make a livable wage? Is this something that only the top 1% of artists can achieve? Are these sensationalized numbers that creators in the space are sharing actually achievable? And what is the more likely outcome? The original idea for this video came from Sarah Spaceman's video based on the cosplay community. However, I am not a cosplayer. I am a professional artist, but my experience is not the experience of everybody out there. I hope that this video will be a resource for the art community. Out of the 938 responses, 43% of them are full-time artists. 27% of them are full-time artists, but conventions are not their main source of income, and tend to sell at events as a side hustle. However, 15% of them are full-time convention artists, and this number will be really important, as this will end up being the baseline that we will refer to, as this is the goal for a lot of people who are hoping to move fully independent and rely on in-person events to make their living. Income from conventions contribute to 10% or less of overall income for a whopping 44% of survey takers. Meaning on average, conventions only contribute to 20 to 30% of an artist's yearly income. But what are artists actually making at these events? The median income from all 900 plus artists who decided to share their yearly income is right under $5,000 USD. That's not per show, that's yearly income. That's the median. Now, obviously, if you look at the data, there's artists who are making a much better living than that. If we look at just full-time artists that are based within the United States, that median income is much higher, at $60,000 to $75,000 yearly. If we compare this to the individual median income in the United States, you get $37,585 US dollars. This is based on the 2022 year, as the recent 2 years have not been officially updated, so I'm sure this number is a little higher, but this is the most reliable number I could find currently. That means on average, if you can make it to full-time status, you will be making more than the average person within the United States. Obviously, depending on where you live, this number may or may not be livable, but statistics. Now, just because you're making a lot of money at conventions doesn't mean there aren't some upfront costs. On average, production costs range around 25% from those surveyed. Now, this is an average. Obviously, some people are way lower and some people are way higher, especially depending on what you sell. About 4% of artists are actually losing money. It is costing them more than they make. Now, if you're a full-time artist and you're making $70,000 a year, which is considered average based on our statistics, you're losing almost $18,000 right off the top in production costs, leaving you with a total of $52,000. But you're going to have more expenses than that. Now, a big factor in your success is what shows are available to you, aka your location. Hot singles in your area? Unlikely. Full-time convention artists on average spend $7,500 to $10,000 a year on travel expenses. So after these expenses, we're already getting dangerously close to that US median income. If we look at our full-time international friends, travel expenses is half of what the United States is paying, which I find is interesting, as 31% of all international convention artists feel that they have to travel outside of their country to find profitable events, compared to the United States, where only 1.3% of United States artists feel they have to travel outside of the States to find profitable shows. However, with a whopping 67% feeling they have to travel to a different city, those US domestic flights must be getting wild. Which they are. I can say that from experience. It sometimes is more expensive for me to go to LA to New York than it is for me to go to LA to Tokyo. It's stupid. Feel free to skip to the timestamp on screen if you are not interested in the international section of this video, although I think this is good advice for anybody.
So we are needing an international opinion, aka you, to represent all of Europe.
I am all of Europe. I am all of Europe.
Representation of all of Europe and then some.
I think there was a lot of sentiment of like the buying power isn't the same in Europe.
Talk to Americans and Canadians who go to like a Dokumi or Japan Expo, and they have said similar sentiments that it's like Also, like the prices are generally lower. I was kind of shocked at how high, like everything's so expensive in the States. So in Europe, you generally have these are like smaller prints a lot, whereas like the really cool, fancy, large prints with the gold foil tend to not sell as well. As long as you're willing to travel, or if you live in Germany, like there's a lot of like full-time convention artists in Germany in particular, because they have like all the good ones. So it's definitely possible. I can't say if it's like easy or if it's more difficult though.
So you would say Germany has the best European cons?
Oh yeah, Germany, they have it so good in Germany. Like Paris as well. Paris is also really good. But Paris is like filled with like excellent artists, so it's harder to stand out, I think. But at the same time, like my most successful convention is the Swedish one. I think it's because I have like home field advantage and people know who I am and they're like, oh my god, it's FIFA, yay! So I mean, I think if I had to travel to Europe from the States, I'd really only pick like the top conventions. Otherwise, it really wouldn't be.
Do you feel happy or satisfied with the income you make just from conventions?
Yes, it's great. I've only been doing it 2 years, but I was like, damn, I've been missing out. I should have done this ages ago. It's, I mean, it's also that it's a really fun job to have. Just kind of getting to travel, meet cool people, make new friends, and kind of like it's nice to get compliments from social, like via the internet. But like when someone comes up to your booth and it's like, I love your work.
One I have is, what advice do you give to European artists that want to enter the convention scene?
Start small, start local, and then, like inch your way towards neighboring countries as you go, I'd say. You don't have to go to the really big ones like Dokumi or Japan Expo because they're expensive and can be pretty hard to get in. I would always recommend trying locally first before and seeing if it works, because even if it's within Europe, travel is always going to be expensive. But then, maybe you try and apply, you don't get in, but most of us, we do start like in a smaller scene and kind of inch our way up, because your first table is always low-key gonna suck unless you do a ton of research. So you'd rather fail on a small scale than on at a super public event, to be frank.
Other than production and travel, there are far more expenses that you might have. For example, I asked those surveyed if they were comfortable exhibiting at a show alone. For a number of reasons, conventions can be extremely tiring and harsh on the body. Only 26% said that they were comfortable in all circumstances soloing a show. I then asked what type of compensation you provide to those helping you or assisting you at these events. I then asked, what expenses do you cover related to the event? And although we did not collect information on payment structures to get averages of what the typical assistant costs, I thought this was important to keep in mind. More than 50% of people are doing less than 5 events. So this could explain why the median income is so low when you account for all survey takers, considering almost a quarter are only doing 1 to 2 a year. In my opinion, setting up a booth is its own skill, separate from the quality of work itself. So if you're not showing at multiple events, it's harder to build up that skill set, and that's going to affect income. And I think these statistics are evidence of that. When asked what type of events you typically sell your work at, the most popular one was anime shows at 65%, followed closely by Comic-Cons at 58%. And then my worst nightmare came true. The write-ins overwhelmingly reminded me that furry conventions exist, with over 50 write-ins. You are actually helping with this video. You reviewed all of the statistics and helped put together a lot of the graphics for the video.
Yeah, actually, the one thing that really stood out to me that was super surprising was the fact that people who do original artwork actually seemed to outperform the people that did fan art.
Now, there's been a long-held belief that selling fan art is the meta at these shows. 78% of artists sell fan art. Now, if we look at full-time artists, it's only slightly higher at 81%. So not much change there. However, if we just look at the median income of those who sell fan art and those who do not, both groups of people who do sell fan art and artists who are selling original work only actually fall in the exact same income bracket. But where it gets interesting is, if you look at full-time artists only, those who do not sell fan art are actually on average making more by $15,000 a year on average. With all these criterias in mind, this actually was a very small data set of only 27 people who did not sell fan art and also were full-time convention artists. out of the 900 plus surveyed, but nonetheless was not the result I expected.
Surprising.
So what we kind of found out is like the top 1% are pretty much fan artists, but then the top 10% are primarily original artists, which is interesting, right?
Yeah, okay.
Everybody has said it's the meta, so everybody's making it, but it's not, apparently it's not paying off for everybody, at least not in like a huge meaningful way.
I almost want to like draw a bell curve of how I think it looks, where I think if you're like newer, I think fan art, you can have more potential to make more money out the gate, because usually your skill level isn't good enough to like have original art and be quality where people would want it. But then eventually as you level up your skills, I think original art takes over. I think that's where like there's that bell curve where it crosses and original makes more. But then if you're like really a well-known artist and you're pumping skill and quality into fan art, I think that's where like just at the tail end comes up and still beats original. But this is very interesting. I am almost like shocked.
If I want a Pikachu print, right, I have so many options. Like the market is flooded. Why would I pick artist A, B, and C and not just get artist A, right? So I think you get that 1% who's just winning at doing that one thing, and then everybody else who thinks they have to do fan art because that's been the narrative so long aren't actually doing as well as they could be if they were, say, pushing work to a different market that isn't so flooded. That's my theory. Now, how about those selling not safe for work content? Only 13% of artists sell spicy material, with the majority of artists having 30% or less of their catalog being spicy content. Again, when looking at all 900 plus surveyed, both not safe for work artists and not safe for work artists fall in the same income bracket. But when we look at full-time artists only, family-friendly content wins out on average. When asked what type of products do you offer, small prints and stickers win out with a majority of over 70%. I wish I added a question about what is your most profitable product, but alas, I didn't think about it at the time, but I would assume that there's some correlation between what products you're offering and what products are selling. Now, I added in a series of quality of life questions to this survey. Just because you can make a living doesn't necessarily mean you are happy doing so. Those surveyed were asked if they are happy with the amount of money they are able to generate through their work at conventions. And I thought this was quite interesting. It is almost 50-50. This skewed a little higher with full-time artists. 18% more of them were satisfied with their income. For those who answered no, I then prompted them with another question. What do you think is the factor holding you back from making more money? The largest factor was location and travel cost at 60%. Now I'm going to touch on these stats in more depth later in the video, but for now, I then asked, do you think the amount of money you make from conventions is a livable wage? And overwhelmingly, at 82%, people answered no, with a huge difference when the full-time artists were asked the same question, with 36% answering no. Ironically meaning that 5% of those surveyed were happy with their income but also felt that it was not livable. The part I find interesting about this is when asked, are you happy with this line of work? Overwhelmingly, people seemed satisfied with this as a career path. So perhaps conventions are fulfilling, but the money just is not reliable enough. Maybe unsurprisingly, but the full-time artists seem to be more positive about their situation. When asked, would you recommend exhibiting to somebody wanting to just now enter the art world? 77% of people surveyed said yes. However, the interesting part is the full-time artists only said yes 64% of the time, even though they seem more positive about their chosen career path. They recommend it at a lower rate. Among those surveyed, when asked, are you able to afford a $500 unexpected expense? 24% of them said no. When asked, are you able to save for retirement? Only 32% said yes. Very close to the national average of 34%. Another almost 50-50. Are conventions a stepping stone for something else? Leading to, has selling your work at conventions led to other art jobs? 41% of people said yes. That 41% of people were then prompted another question. What type of work/opportunities has this led to? 8% of people said it led to an animation job, 13% said a gaming job, 76% of people said private commissions, 69% of people said freelance, 8% advertising, 17% publishing, 16% consignment, 11% gallery, 10% licensing, and 10% YouTube or content creation. And 4 people did a write-in without actually writing anything.
I started doing convention, right? So it was bringing me so much money that I'm like, why am I in animation? But because I'm making so much money, I have the financial freedom to be like, hey, can you give me way more money? Or I'm not gonna pick this project up. In a nicer way. I don't say it like that.
When asked if making a living at conventions have gotten easier or harder since when you started, overall, people seem to find it more difficult. However, when asked full-time artists, this skews even farther into the more difficult opinion. And although, in my own experience, I think the amount of money you can make at a convention is higher than it used to be, there's certainly more money in the room, more people attend it, they're more popular, it has definitely gotten much more difficult. But I think the longer you have done that, the easier it is to see the changes that have made it more competitive. So if you're a newbie, that power creep might not be so obvious to you. So I find these statistics to be in line with that opinion.
Because I don't know about you guys, I've locked in like 3 shows next year that are definitely over $1,000 for the booth, but I think it's because I'm feeling a little bit of the pressure. And I know we'll talk about it on one of these later graphs too, but on this one that we're looking at, competition, honestly, I think competition's been the highest it's ever been. And I think that's only going to continue to grow. So I think this isn't just a concern for younger artists or someone that's been doing it for a few years. This is someone, I mean, I've been doing cons for 10 years plus, and I'm still nervous to get into cons. It's not a locked in thing. Like, I think it needs to get out more that just because you do have a following doesn't mean you're automatically going to get into some of these bigger cons.
What do you guys imagine when they do the jury process?
My best guess is literally they pull up a screen and they do kind of like Tinder style, like yes or no within 3 to 5 seconds, and they just move on to the next one. I do not believe they're like looking through all the credentials of every single applicant.
The bigger thing I think that is taking up like artist spots is nepotism over like a following. I think it's more like the juror's like best friend who like probably isn't somebody well known. I think is taking up way more spots in these artist alleys than people with big followings are.
That's the one word we don't talk about.
From my experience, that's like been the case. Like 5 people getting in the show every year who like have no credentials. Yeah, Lottery is the best way to like not get criticized for your like sketchy jury processes.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest, and you don't have to use this for the YouTube, but if we were showrunners at a convention and all of our friends applied and then a bunch of randos, of course we'd probably let all of our friends in.
Oh, for sure, but you would do a jury process and say that, you know what I mean? You wouldn't say lottery.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm gonna write you a wait list. Specifically for John, I'm gonna write you for Sean Con 2025, and I'm gonna say I'm sorry you just didn't make the cut. Honestly,
so notes and feedback. You don't even use color.
You don't even use color. You didn't draw enough Digimon. You need to get out of here.
Oh my god. Over a third of everybody who submitted their data to this survey did a write-in. So I think I got something like 300 plus write-ins, some of them being very extensive. Although I can't go into all of them in depth, me and some other convention friends, as you have seen in this video, did discuss a number of them. So if you see the editing jumping from conversation to conversation, that's why I had to edit a lot of footage down to get the most interesting parts of it. The full results are in a link in the description down below as a resource for you guys. So feel free to check that out. Obviously, everybody who submitted is anonymous, but the data is there. And although submissions are closed for that particular survey, I would love to continue this conversation down in the comments below. So if you have anything to add on this topic, please feel free.
And it's funny, they're saying artist alley versus vendor floor. I find the vendor floor to be more profitable. How do you guys feel about that?
In my experience, every show is different. Like, there's definitely shows where it's like the vendor's floor is where it's at because of the layout. People who are shopping for art, or at least like the type of art that we make, are going to look in the artist alley first. I have always found that the vendor floor is twice the price at least, and I make half as much money. That being said, I know like people who do licensing stuff, they've had different experiences, but again, like I think those are what people are expecting in that room. There's definitely different audiences in different rooms. There's been plenty of times where I've been in an artist alley and people have said, oh yeah, I don't even even step foot in the vendors hall. Like, I hear that all the time, and I'm sure like there's a vice versa to that probably as well. So for me, if I can't be in the artist alley, I probably don't go to the show. I also asked those surveyed if they use a proxy for any of their shows. 8.4% of those surveyed said that they do use a proxy. For those who don't know, a proxy is where you send somebody on your behalf to sell for you at the show. This is different from having an assistant or somebody helping you at the show, as the artist does not show up to the event at all. For those who sell in the vendor hall, this is pretty common. For those who sell in the artist alley, many shows are getting more strict about this and are not allowing the use of proxies. This subject has been a bit controversial among the community. When surveyed, 12.4% say that proxies should not be allowed under any circumstances. 71% say with reasonable exceptions, and 15.8% of people find proxies to be acceptable.
I feel like I might get some flack for this, but I'm going to say no. I don't think they should be allowed at all, actually.
Ever?
Or
No.
artist alley. Oh,
Ever.
ever.
Ooh.
Not even an exhibitor.
No. I think it's getting so competitive nowadays where in my mind I'm like, if you want to take away money from that show, you have to be there. I think if we really want to offset the pay to win mentality conventions is kind of leaning into, I think a lot of these artists can't be doing 40, 50 cons a year and only actually attending 6 of them.
So I actually wouldn't mind this. To be clear, I don't necessarily agree, but I wouldn't mind this happening if it was enforceable, and I don't think it is, and I think that's the problem on a like a full scale. Like, we've seen, like, I think it's Anime Boston and like MomoCon and Fanime be very aggressive with like cross-checking with those other shows on if people are like having proxies or whatever.
But people still get away with
But
it, which
people
is crazy.
still get away with it. Yeah. Again, that's like the difference between like the vendor spot and the artist alley, right? Is like vendors are for businesses. Like, if I'm a business, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm an individual artist. You could be a studio or whatever. So it gets a lot more muddy and it gets a lot harder. So I don't think I could say that proxies aren't allowed there because they're an employee. At that point, they're not even a proxy, right?
Actually, okay, I almost want to open this one up to the comment section of when you go to a convention, do you go to see an artist specifically, or would that deter you from not going if none of the artists you wanted to see were going?
Do you think it's more like a gotcha situation, though? Like, people don't actually know who's going to be there, but they're like, oh, I'm excited to see.
That's what I'm
new art.
wondering. But now that you're saying it, I have had more people in recent years tell me specifically at my booth that they came because they saw I posted about it, not because they happened to be there already. But I don't know what that percentage is. I still would assume it's a very small percentage.
Yeah. See, now
But
you're
if
just getting
every
more evidence to the popular artists are the only ones who are like getting in argument.
Do you think showrunners are in this level of thinking, or are they not caring about
I think
that?
it depends on the show. I think if
Depends on the show.
like
Absolutely.
you truly believe that only like popular artists are the ones that are able to get in, then I still don't think that booth costs should be higher. You should be offering us guest spots for free because we're the ones bringing people to your show. So I think seeing that like that is not happening and that is not effective, it kind of debunks that right out of the gate.
Yeah, I guess the more I'm thinking about it from your perspective, if a popular artist, let's say, brought in 10 to 20 artists that were, or people that were not going to attend, the cost of the ticket alone probably paid for the booth and then some. The convention's actually profiting off of the fact that this person has a reputation outside of the convention.
Another major point of contention that was noted in the write-ins is that many major shows in the last couple years have made interesting changes, whether it's their application process, their pricing, or the amount of artists they are allowing on an exhibition floor, all of which can massively affect an artist's income.
Also, the trend for this year, I don't know if you want to talk about it or not, but the trend for this year of cons opening up more space, thus adding more competition in like the vendor hall and exhibitor and artist alley.
Yeah, but those tables don't get half the price, but you make half the money if they double the size. So
exactly,
collectively, like they've doubled their table price in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And the table prices are still going up, even though they have double the artists that are there.
There's shows that I've taken off my list of applying to that used to be considered like S-tier shows that I'm just like, there's too many people in the room.
What do you do for the increased interest then? I've been trying to think about this because, you know, like, yeah, it feels great to get into any show, you know, at what cost.
I mean, it's great for like the consumers, right? It's not so much like, you know, your craft mom person can't necessarily like make a living anymore on this, which is sad. I used to love seeing all the craft moms, but like they've been completely pushed out. It's hard.
I do think that a lot of them probably do think that, you know, that it does help the artist, and, you know, and maybe it does, you know, like just getting into a show to test.
Yeah, if they cut the table costs in half, sure. I mean, then it's fine. And it's like, yeah, it still might not be a fruitful enough show for like, say, me or somebody else who is like looking for a very standard like number to like travel to. But for people who are starting out, like if they can get a cheap table, and even if it's not like the most like profitable show, it's not like they're going to lose money in most cases.
Right, exactly.
So like I don't necessarily mind doubling spaces, but they have to, you know, it has to make sense. Like there's only so much money in a room. So I'm hoping like the medium like income for all 900 like surveyed was like $3,000 to $5,000. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like they cannot afford $1,000 booth. It's crazy, which is getting closer to the average now. Like
right,
2017, like a $300 booth was considered like outrageous. $300 booth now is like the cheapest I see ever. My average booth cost per show is about $800. I'm hoping this video will be a reality check. I've been doing it 7+ years. It's been a build up, right? And I mean like 3 to 4 of those were not profitable. I mean, like I don't mind buying a booth, but like at what percentage should I be required to pay to be there? People get really mad at like Etsy, right? Because of I know it's like 6.5% fee or whatever, but it's like actually like 14% after all their fees or something. Etsy expects that they can take 14% of your sale right off the top. If that is considered within the art community unacceptable, which you don't have to go far online to see that narrative, what percentage of, you know, a booth fee is expecting? If I have to pay $1,000 booth fee, that means I have to make at least 10 grand for them to get 10% of it. If I make 5 grand, now they're taking 20% of it. What are they actually expecting me to make?
Right.
And what percentage do they think they are like, you know, do they deserve out of that? So I think thinking about it more in that terms, right? So because like you shouldn't be paying for an event based on your booth fees. Like if you need the event to succeed and be financially stable from the backs of like artists who are making the event what it is, or like vendors or anything, then like the event probably has already failed. Like you've already not gotten enough attendance for it to be fruitful for anybody. Upcharging us to make sure you cover your costs just is like, it's bad business. It's not sustainable.
So, like, I mean, I definitely feel it. Like, I feel choked a lot of times when I go because, you know, I'm not that big of an artist. I'm a smaller artist. You know, depending on the show, like, I'm definitely, like, counting my numbers. Like, is this going to be worth it for me to go? Or, you know, if I'm only bringing home a couple $100, like, to sit there for 4 days, like, you know, that's not necessarily good. You know, money is money, but...
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely see your concern with these convention showrunners taking advantage of maybe like seeing like the like sensationalized maybe like numbers that like, you know, artists pull. All right. So what I thought was kind of crazy was the fact that all full-time artists, if you like crunch the numbers down to average because there were ranges for the income and stuff like that, and you kind of lean a little bit more conservative with like your top 1%ers, even then, all of the full-time artists, all combined, potentially have made $11,500,000, which is crazy to think about.
I think so. Hearing that number sounds like a big number, but when I break it down, I'm like, so the pool of full-time artists is 147 people.
But one person also didn't answer the income, so 146.
Oh, I see.
Not that it matters.
I see. But it's like, okay, 146 people combined could buy 5 LA houses. If you think about it like that, it's not very good. You know, I could have made a whole survey just on like expenses, but at the end of the day...
Yeah,
big numbers sound good, but big
that.
Number maybe not so good. I just want to say that these videos take an immense amount of research and time to create. So if you found it helpful at all, I would really appreciate if you could like and subscribe to the channel. This makes these types of videos possible.
And I feel like sometimes just seeing the end result skew the expectation of those who are just starting out. So we created this survey because money is hard to talk about. The survey being anonymous relieved a lot of pressure around the taboos of sharing numbers, the shame of not doing well at a show. When you ask another artist how the show's going, good or bad can mean a lot of different things to different people.
And most importantly, I want to thank everybody who contributed to this data set. Without you, this video would not be possible.
So I look up at the ceiling fan. Everything feels lighter staring at the ceiling fan. So I look
Also, here's my representation of San Diego Comic-Con. Ready?
Okay.
That's what it is. Oh, you see that little that's Artist Alley, and this is the rest of the floor.